Hello, everyone, dear learners. As we discussed the non Western perspectives of human rights, and we dealt with the Hindu perspective of human rights and then the contribution of Buddhism to human rights, we found that, both the religious, spiritual, and philosophical traditions, they are among the oldest traditions of the world. Buddhism and Hinduism, they originated in India. They contributed immensely to the human rights that we have already discussed. After Buddhist and the Hindu perspective of human rights, we are going to deal with the Islamic perspectives on human rights. As you all know that Islam is one of the religions under Abrahamic traditions. In the Abrahamic traditions, we include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Originating in Arabia, it has the second largest followers in the world, and it is also said that it is also one of the fastest growing religions. So far as the Islamic perspective of human rights is concerned, it can be understood in the light of the Quran, that is the holy book revealed to Prophet Muhammad, the main book, and then the Sunnah, the prophetic traditions, and other religious and philosophical sources. But the most authentic exposition of Islamic perspective of human rights you will find in Quran and the Sunnah, the prophetic traditions. First of all, we should remember that according to Islamic teachings, humans are the noblest of all creations, and that is why they have been called Ashraful Makhluqat. It means noblest of all creations of God. Human beings have been endowed with reason and free will. Since they have been given reason, the conscience, to determine what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is moral and what is immoral, and at the same time they have been given free will. Therefore, they are accountable for their deeds here and hereafter according to Islamic belief. The Islamic perspective of human rights can be understood in the light of two basic principles. The two basic principles are Huququllah, that is rights of Allah or duties of the believers toward Allah, the Almighty. So, the rituals, the prayers, they are included under it. On the other hand, there is Huququl Ibad, that is rights of every soul on another, or duties towards humanity at large. It is important to understand that, it is believed under the Islamic tradition that God may forgive a person if he has not fulfilled his duties under what is called Huququllah. But so far as the violation of the Huququl Ibad is concerned, for that punishment is must. So the man will be punished in this world as well as hereafter. Islam believes, again this is interesting and this is important to note, that Islam believes that rights are conferred by God. It is not given by a state or ruler. As we were discussing that rights are natural, they are not gift of a state. In the Western tradition of human rights, we were saying that they are the gift of nature, or they have not been created by a state or law, rather they were just recognized. Here you will find that Islam believes that rights are conferred by God. It is not given by a state or ruler. Since it is given by God, it cannot be taken away by any legislature, executive, state, or any other authority. So, this is something that the rights are perpetual, permanent, and they cannot be taken away. Having said this, Now we are going to highlight some of the important rights that is under Islam. Again, I will say that there is paucity of time. We have to wind up this topic in one lecture, so that is why I will not go into much detail. So therefore, some important rights that have been highlighted under the teachings of Islam we are going to discuss here. Number one, the sanctity of the right to life. As you all know that right to life is one of the most important rights recognized all over the world. It is a universal right. So the sanctity of the right to life has been emphasized in Islamic tradition. The Quran states, whosoever kills a human being without any reason like manslaughter or mischief on earth, it is as though he had killed all mankind. And whoever saves a life, it is as though he had saved the lives of all mankind. So you can see that, what is being emphasized here, that the right to life is sacrosanct. And if an innocent person is killed by anyone, it is as if the person has committed crime against humanity. He has killed all human beings. But if the same person tries to save the life of one person, it is as if he has saved the humanity. It also mentions, the Quran mentions, do not kill a soul which Allah has made except through the due process of law. So it means that the right to life, it is granted and it is sacrosanct, and nobody can be killed by the state or by the government or by the caliph just because he is not liked by the caliph or by the state, because this right to life has been granted by God. Equality of all human beings. Again, this is a very, very important aspect of Islam. Is also an egalitarian religion that believes in equality of all human beings. So here we find that in the prophetic traditions and also in the Quran, the equality has been emphasized, and it is the equality of all human beings. The Prophet Muhammad's farewell sermon highlights the principles of equality, freedom, and respect for the rights of others. Prophet Muhammad said, no Arab has any superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a white man have superiority over a black man. You all are the children of Adam, and Adam was created from clay. So you see this universal brotherhood that is being emphasized here. At the same time, equality of all human beings have been emphasized, that all human beings have been, they have taken birth from Adam, and since they all are sons and daughters of Adam, so that is why the universal brotherhood, fraternity, that is being emphasized. And it is also being said that there is no superiority on the basis of color, caste, or the race or the place of birth, etc. This is of course one of the fundamental principles and the pillars of Islam. The rights of women. Islam prohibited female infanticide, a practice commonly prevalent in Arabia and other parts of the world at that time. Before the advent of Islam, you will find this was a common practice in Arabia and in many parts of the world. So Islam strictly prohibited female infanticide, and that's why in the teachings of Prophet Muhammad you will find that daughters have been given utmost importance, and it is said that Prophet Muhammad played a very important role in giving a dignified status to women. With regard to gender equality, Islamic precepts are worth commending. For example, marriage is made as a contract which can be dissolved for reasons of incompatibility and other valid reasons and not on flimsy grounds. So it is not something, marriage according to Islam is not a perpetual relation where the nobody is allowed to go out of wedlock. So here, marriage is made a contract which can be dissolved for reasons of incompatibility and other valid reasons. Interestingly, women are given inheritance rights and their consent in marriage is essential. You will find very few religions had given the inheritance right to women. It was given under Islamic law and it was given under Islam. It is also important to mention that Islam gives the women in wedlock to seek khula, that is separation from their husbands. Again, a very revolutionary or radical kind of concept where women were also allowed to take khula or separation from the husband if husband was cruel or if there was incompatibility. After this, we are moving to the rights of prisoners and law of war. Today, you see that the law of war is also called the international humanitarian law. We talk of Geneva Conventions. So, the today's principles of international humanitarian law are found to a great extent in Islamic principles of the conduct of war. It includes the rights of the non-combatants, such as women, children, old persons, and the infirm, and the believers are commanded not to harm or kill them. So, in no circumstances you see that the women, children, old persons, and infirm are to be killed, even during war. It is strictly prohibited. The Prophet also commanded not to kill monks in the monasteries or people sitting in places of religious worship. Again, the wounded persons, the prisoners of war, or the enemies in captivity should not be killed. Looting and destruction in the enemy territory is prohibited. So, under Islamic law, looting, plundering, and the destruction in the enemy territory is also prohibited. What happens sometimes that the acts of certain Muslim rulers or the kings who invaded countries, looted, the properties, they are identified as representing Islam. But we should remember that that was deviation from the teachings of Islam. So that is why looting and destruction in the enemy territory is strictly prohibited under Islamic law of war. The Islamic laws of war prohibited the Muslim armies from cutting down fruit-bearing trees in their paths. The believers are also commanded to preserve the natural vegetation, crops and livestock. Again important. It is not only about these things, but you will find the dead bodies of the enemy during the war should not be mutilated and should be returned to the enemies. That dignity is to be maintained. The sanctity of the dead bodies is to be maintained in all circumstances whatsoever. It is being highlighted. After war, we are coming to the principle of international law, one of the important principles that we talk of today, that is right to seek asylum. It is interesting that the Islamic migration law, that is the law of hijrah or the hijrat, states that individuals have the right to seek and be granted asylum. So, the Islamic State or the Islamic Commonwealth cannot turn down their request for asylum in the true sense of the term. Interestingly, it is incumbent upon Muslims to accept refugees and provide protection so long as they want. So if people are migrating or the migrants are there, they are trying to seek asylum or they are refugees, then you cannot turn down their request, they are to be welcomed. At the same time, you have to provide all kind of protection under Islamic law. This is incumbent upon Muslims under the Islamic State. The principle of general amnesty, again a very, very important principle that was, invoked by Islam during war. If the enemy surrenders, the marching army of Muslims have to grant amnesty and make peace. It has been commanded. Prophet Muhammad himself set the example by declaring general amnesty after conquering Mecca. When Muslims conquered Mecca, the same Mecca where you will find that the Muslims were tortured, they faced all kind of brutalities. Many of them were killed. Prophet himself was tortured by the people in Mecca. But when Mecca was conquered by Muslims, Prophet Muhammad declared general amnesty for all the people in Mecca. The rights of minorities. Today, we find there is a lot of debate on the rights of minorities. And it is said, Lord Acton rightly said, that the treatment that is given to minorities or the amount of security that is enjoyed by minorities in any state is a yardstick to judge that state's claim to civility. Here what we find that the rights of minorities is being highlighted in what is called that Charter of Medina or the Misaq-e-Medina signed by Prophet Muhammad. It provided equality to all its citizens and accepted the coexistence of all religious communities. So, different religious communities, for example, Jews, Christians, pagans, and Muslims, they all were living. And at that time, under Charter of Medina, what happened that equality to all the citizens was provided, and the principle of peaceful coexistence was already highlighted over there under Charter of Medina. It also provided equal protection and rights to all religions, all religious, tribal, and ethnic communities. So it means the religious practices of these communities were not prohibited, rather they were given freedom and protection. Again, the rights of the poor and destitutes in the wealth of the rich. This is one of the revolutionary principles in Islam, that it is not that people, those who are poor, needy, or destitutes, we have to treat them by sympathizing with them. Under Islamic principles, you will find that it becomes the right of the poor, destitute, and needy that he or she has a right in the wealth of the rich people. The rich have to give a share of their wealth to the needy people compulsorily. They cannot say no to it. Thus, zakat is obligatory for all Muslims who meet the necessary criteria. It is to be given every year. Zakat is that can be understood in today as a kind of tax that is to be given by every Muslim, who is meeting certain criteria. It means that he is economically well off. Then he has to give a particular portion of his wealth to the poor people, and it is compulsory. He cannot say no to it. This is the right of the poor and the duty of the rich. So that is why it is a revolutionary principle. Islamic ethical norm prohibits the wasteful use of resources and extravaganza. It encourages a simple level with the bare minimum. Again, you see, this is interesting, as most of the religions of the world we found in Buddhism and Hinduism also, simple living has been encouraged. Similarly, in Islam, you will find that Islamic ethical norm prohibits the wasteful use of resources and extravaganza. And what Islam encourages, a simple living with bare minimum. So it means that Muslims are commanded not to indulge in extravaganza. Today, when we are talking about consumerism, today when we are talking about that the line of demarcation between greed and need is becoming thinner, many people, they think that their greed is their need. So what happens that there are certain people who are claiming, who are struggling for what is called right to have safe drinking water. On the other hand, there are people who are claiming right to champagne and alcohol, and they say that this is our right. So that is why when there is a conflict between right to wine and the right to safe drinking water, we can see, what is the position. So that is why this principle that Islamic ethical norm prohibits the wasteful use of resource and extravaganza, it will ultimately promote what is called the sustainable development, where we are not spending much and we are thinking of the future generation as well. Simple living has been encouraged. The European Islamic Council adopted the Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights on 19 September 1981. And based on this document, a group of jurists and distinguished scholars from Arab countries adopted the draft Charter on Human and People's Rights in the Arab world on 12 December 1986. This is again important. So, Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights. So that has been drafted in the light of the teachings of Islam. What Islam says about human rights. So, in the light of the teachings of Islam, and I had already mentioned that the faith-based tradition are basically duty-based traditions. So, they may be rights of the people, but at the same time, this is the duty of all believers to do this. For example, right to give zakat, the duty to give zakat. So, it becomes the duty of the rich, but it also becomes what is called the right of the poor. So, therefore, we have been discussing right from the very beginning that the rights and duties go together, and that's why we have to strike a balance between rights and duties. Our claim to rights or that will become meaningless if we are not ready to perform our duties. So that is why you see that Islam is also like Hinduism and Buddhism, a duty-based tradition. But here you will find that this Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights, it has been drafted in the light of the teachings of Islam. So you can find what is the Islamic approach to human rights in this document. And based on this document, a group of jurists and distinguished scholars from Arab countries adopted the draft Charter on Human and People's Rights in the Arab world on 12 December 1986. These documents, based on the Quran and Sunnah, provide a detailed list of rights such as protection, security of human life, freedom from slavery or servitude, right to justice, right to fair trial, right to protection against abuse of power, respect for the chastity of women, freedom of religion for religious minorities, economic rights, etc. These things have been highlighted. So, in a nutshell, we can say that the socio-economic, cultural, political, civil rights, that we say first generation of human rights, second generation of rights, and then the rights of minority, the group right, that we say the third generation of human rights. So all these three generations of human rights have been incorporated in this charter or in this declaration. Right to participate in the conduct of the affairs of the state. The Islamic perspective on political rights can be understood from the fact that every Muslim has a right to participate in the affairs of the Islamic State or Islamic Commonwealth. Very, very important. So all the people, they are becoming a stakeholder in governance. The Khalifa, the head of the Islamic Commonwealth, or the ruler, is accountable to Allah as well as to the people of the state. So, the ruler will not occupy the throne through hereditary right, but he will be selected through the consent and consensus of the Ummah. On the basis of this principle, you will find there is a lot of debate in the Islamic world. There are, groups the groups who claim that democracy is a Western construct and that is why democracy is not compatible with Islamic teachings. But here we find that the element of democracy is very much there. For example, it is said that every Muslim has the right to participate in the affairs of an Islamic state. This is one of the fundamental principles of democracy. Number two, you see, the Khalifa will not be hereditary. Rather, he will be selected on the basis of the consensus by the people or the representatives of the people. That may be understood as electoral college, as it happened in the time of the four rightly guided caliphs. So it is not hereditary. So hereditary kingship is against the teachings of Islam. Kingship is not allowed at all because it is hereditary and the ruler is not above law. He has to follow the principles and the injunctions that have been that are there under Sharia or in Quran. So that is why this whether democracy is Islamic or not, whether it is having compatibility or not. So I think, in my personal opinion, I believe that if democracy is a accountable form of government, democracy means people's participation in the decision making, then we can find that the element of democracy or the roots of democracy are very much there in the teachings of Islam. So it will becomes it becomes wrong to say that democracy is incompatible with Islam. What has happened that many dictatorial rulers or the kings, hereditary monarchs, they have tried to denounce democracy, condemn democracy as a Western construct. So therefore, there can be an Islamic theory of democracy that should be developed by the Islamic theorists and the scholars. So that is why, in the light of these teachings, we can say that democracy is not antithetical to Islam. In the conclusion, we can say the Islamic concept of rights was very advanced as it applied to all humans, regardless of whether they were Muslims. The principles of universal brotherhood, equality, and non-discrimination are significant bases of the Islamic concept of rights. The Quranic injunction to enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong underscores the ethical imperative to uphold human rights and oppose injustice. Throughout the history, Islamic societies have implemented principles of social welfare and distributive justice. Distributive justice is an integral part of Islamic system of governance. So, they have implemented principle of social welfare and distributive justice, exemplified by the institution of waqf, that is endowment, and the provision of zakat, charitable giving. So, thank you very much. With this, we are concluding our lecture on the non-Western perspectives of human rights. And in this, we discussed about the Hindu perspective on human rights, Buddhist perspective on human rights, and then we discuss about the Islamic perspective on human rights. But let me clarify that there are many other traditions that we have not included just because of paucity of time. And the learner should develop interest to find the roots of human rights in Sikhism, Jainism, and many other religious traditions, for example, Christianity, Judaism, and many other religions of the world, or the faith-based traditions. Due to paucity of time and the limitation of the time that we have to wind up syllabus on time, so that is why we have included only these three non-Western perspectives on human rights. They are faith-based. Thank you very much.